I'll first ask Subhash to join in. Subhash, I'll just add you to the call. Subhash, if you can just accept my request, I've added you to the call. Hi, Subhash. How are you doing?
Yeah. Hey, hi, Swapnil. I'm doing all right. Thanks. How are you?
I'm doing fine. Thank you so much. So, Subhash, just coming straight to the point, today we're talking about whether left-leaning intellectuals and activists are being unfairly targeted by the political establishment, or whether this is akin to suppression of dissent, or whether the government is justified in acting against them, because obviously the pen is mightier than the sword. What's your take?
I think the major reason why people feel that the government is targeting intellectuals is because of the scale of the arrests, about 8 or 9 arrests, and the way this government operates in terms of being very strong in security and so on and so forth. So when you combine both of them, it gives the impression that the government is targeting intellectuals. But actually, if you go deeper into it, it's a little more complex than that. One is, if you look at some of the arrests, there are, I think, a couple of people who have already been convicted in the past for holding weapons. Now, whether those convictions are fair or unfair is not for me to comment, but they have been convicted before. And they have been convicted when the Congress was in power, and in both in Maharashtra and here. So there is a history behind this. The second thing is that if you look at the post-arrest response of the government, there's a lot of emphasis on this narrative that the UPA also did the same. So if you're really trying to push the idea that you're trying to curb dissent, that's not what you would do. You would rather say we are different, we have done something that the others haven't. So I, for one, do not buy the hypothesis that this is targeted intellectuals, and particularly so if you look at the post-response, and if you look at how people are able to articulate their views, we are able to organize this debate and so on and so forth, it's very clear that a certain kind of fringe has been targeted. Whether the fringe has been targeted fairly or unfairly is a second point, not a secondary issue, but a second point. Now, coming back to the history of both the Maharashtra police as well as the police in general in India, we struggle from very, very low conviction rates. The conviction rates, I think, of the Maharashtra police are less than 15%. The national police nationally is about 20%, which means the statistical odds of more than 2 of these people arrested being convicted is extremely low, which means that 6 of these 8 people are going to suffer, go through the whole legal process and not get convicted. Now, for many of us, that might be small cost because we are not the ones. But if you are a family where one of your family members has been targeted and 5 years down the line is going to be acquitted, it's a very, very, it's a very, very painful process that one has to go through.
Sure.
So I think that is something that we have to empathize, irrespective of whether it is those arrested for the whole Hindu terrorism issue I think that was in Maharashtra. That was also in Maharashtra, I think, where I think about 5 or 6 were arrested for Hindu terror. I think none of them have been convicted. So it's a problem that we face on both ends of the spectrum. And I think first, as Indians, we must be very particular about whom we are arresting, and the conviction rates definitely have to go up. But as I said again, I don't see this as a larger targeting because of the way they have managed the imagery. Now, coming back to one of the hypotheses why this was done, I think one was perhaps they saw this as a real threat and they did, and that I think is something that the most right-wing commentators believe very strongly in. The other thing is that in terms of the timing is that I think there could be a political trigger as well. And the political trigger is that our data, at least on our platform, Crowd Wisdom, suggests that the BJP is kind of stalling. It's not able to move the swing voters outside their public domain.
Okay.
So while I don't see this as directly linked to it, or this has been done because of that, but I think in this there is an opportunity, politically at least, for the BJP in terms of saying, hey, look, we are strong on security. And you don't forget there was a fire filed against Robert Vadra as well about a week back. Yeah. So while these incidents may not be necessarily related to that, but there is a clear political advantage in portraying a strong security image and particularly trying to move voters who feel a little insecure about Naxal violence. I think there is that angle. Again, given some of the commentary I've heard today in the morning, I'm not suggesting that they have done this because of this reason, but there's a clear political advantage.
There could be a clear.
There could be a political advantage, but I'll be very honest to saying that this has been targeted intellectuals. Initially, when I heard about it, I felt, yeah, that was the first response. But when you go finer details, it seems to be something that I think in India has been happening quite a bit. It's wrong given the low conviction rates, but I think we need to look at it from both perspectives. But we must be wary, and I'm not talking about this government, but all governments.
Very clear.
Look at some of the arrests that have been done in Karnataka under the Congress government. We as Indians have to be very wary about how governments use laws, and the low conviction rates, I think, is a very, very concerning. And it's not just with people from the very far left or far right. It is about any Indian. After all, we are all Indians, and we should care for how other Indians are treated by the government.
Sure. Just one thing there. I mean, so obviously some of these activists have been arrested in the past, and not just, I was looking up Varvara Rao, and he's a Telugu, poet and very influential, and he's been arrested by state governments ranging back. I mean, he was arrested in the emergency. He was arrested prior to the emergency. So he's that kind of a person and he's been acquitted on many of the charges that, the state government or even the central government, they've slapped on him. And, he's been acquitted of a lot of them. Somebody like, Vernon Gonzalez, who was actually a teacher. And, he was, I think, convicted by, he was in fact charged initially by the UPA government in 2007. And, of very, very serious charges. And, I think he was acquitted, in fact, of a lot of them. That's what I've been.
Vernon, I think, was convicted.
Okay, because I'm just looking up somewhere, and it says 2007-13 acquitted in 17 cases against him. So maybe he was convicted in a couple more, or maybe. So there were 20 cases slapped against him.
2007, he was convicted. I think he served about 5 or 6 years in jail.
5 or 6 years, and then 17 of the cases were, dismissed.
Acquitted.
He was acquitted in 2013. So, and you also make a point about, low conviction rates. So, is it something that a way to harass, our political establishments, knowing that the conviction rates are low, and knowing that, the long arm of the law, whenever they provide this the fair trial. The fair trial itself takes a lot of time. So, is it a tool used by governments to harass? Is there some semblance of truth in this argument that this is a tool used by various governments to harass activists? Because some of these activists are obviously very, very influential. Obviously they are highly intellectual, and they have the power of the word behind them, and they can influence. So. Do you think this is a tool that governments have used?
To be very honest, I think none of these activists are very influential. And I'm trying to be very particular. I'm talking about in them driving public opinion. This is not a Kavita Krishnan or somebody who a lot of people follow and listen to.
Sure.
She's from the far left. And so on. So I'm not very certain that this group of people qualifies something that will be mainstream left of center opinion. This is a little far on the far left of the image.
Really far
left. Okay. Yeah. Now, insofar as whether the government's agenda is to harass, given the low conviction rates, yes, across, and this has been for years now. Police forces. In fact, one of the articles that I had written early last year or a year before that, I had pointed out police reform as one of the most serious reforms required in the country.
Okay.
And the way the police forces are managed. Imagine there's a Trump investigation on right now by this Justice Department, with the Justice Secretary saying, I'm completely going to be out of this case. I'm not going to look at the files. And in India, you have all kinds of nefarious stuff happening. It's because of how the police forces are managed, how the investigation agencies are managed at the center and at the state.
Yeah.
And if you ask the citizenry about this particular discussion, this discussion is about politics. A lot of people talk about BJP being bad, Congress being good, or Congress being bad and BJP being good. But really, the real debate
is not bipolar. Exactly.
This real civilizational debate is what kind of authority have we given our police forces, who is managing them, how efficient they are, how accurate they are in terms of the conviction rates. That is the real debate, but we're not having that debate. Right now, the right wants to call all these people urban nexals, and anybody who speaks in their favor as urban nexals. The left want to treat every single such action as freedom of expression discussion. I think that is a stalemate for a young country that wants to move forward. We have to look at our systems and processes, and that means that police reforms is the area that we need to focus on. And there is a 2007 report for police reforms that no government has done anything about. It's
Sure. It's lying in
11 years now.
Yeah.
So I think there is a lot of emotions behind partisan politics these days. But frankly speaking, if you're a really true patriot, that you're worried about the freedom of every individual, then I think systemic change, particularly in the the entire law enforcement, right from the High Court, Supreme Court, all the way down to the police, is really where I think we need to have discussions on. But nobody wants to have the discussion. It's similar to education. Everybody thinks education is important, but there is no discussion on education. So
I think we should. I think we should.
Yeah, we are very happy on knowing who's going to win the next election.
Yeah.
But the real systemic reforms like education or police, we don't have a conversation. That is where we need to have conversations, because that will dramatically change how the country moves forward.
Completely understand and completely agree with you. So thank you so much, Subhash. Is there any other point you would like to add at this juncture?
No, I made my points.
Okay, thank you so much, Subhash. Thanks for your views. I'll just now add the second speaker. So thank you for your views. Yeah. Okay, guys. So that was Subhash Chandra. He's he's actually a very, very active political consultant. He runs his own startup. So a guy who clearly wears many hats, and he has interacted closely with politicians. So it made a fair point. It's made a fair point that the low conviction rates is a problem, and he doesn't believe that these guys who were arrested last week were extremely influential. Or he also made a larger point that these are extreme left ideologies. So while the present government may have tried to score some political brownie points, that was not the major objective, and maybe they feel a real threat that these guys are sort of associated with certain activities which are normally linked to the Maoists. So I will now get our second speaker.